The gala hall erupted in a sharp gasp as Claire Donovan stepped onto the marble floor, the polished surface reflecting the chandelier's crystal light and the sudden turn of every head. Nate Carter, mid-toast, froze mid-laugh, his champagne glass tilting, catching the light in a sudden shimmer as Claire's black silk gown swept past, heels clicking a deliberate rhythm, announcing her presence before a single word escaped her lips. The subtle shift in air pressure seemed to pull the crowd inward, eyes following her with a mix of curiosity and surprise. A waiter dropped a tray of hors d'oeuvres, silver and porcelain clattering across the floor, punctuating the tension. Claire's hand brushed the edge of a velvet rope as she passed, grounding herself in the familiar texture while memories of wedding nights, empty promises, and laughter turned sour flickered in the corner of her vision, a flashback of Nate whispering, "We'll always be together," while clinking glasses in their old apartment. The sound echoing in the gala hall unclaimed as if suspended in time. She stepped closer to the center of the room, where Nate's voice tried to regain control. "And to new beginnings," he declared, raising his glass. Yet the energy had shifted, subtle whispers threading through the crowd like wind over autumn leaves. Claire's eyes scanned the room for familiar faces, plotting, calculating, a slight arch of her brow signaling an invisible challenge. Nate's fiancée moved closer, sensing the unspoken tension, her heels scraping against the wooden floor. Claire caught the movement, slight smirk curling her lips, eyes narrowing. She turned, letting the sparkle of her earrings catch the light and draw the gaze of a few key onlookers, micro-expressions of intrigue and judgment flickering across their faces. A waiter brushing past dropped a napkin that floated to her feet. Claire bent just enough to pick it up, the motion precise, deliberate, a claim on her own space, her hand brushing against the polished wood of the serving tray, grounding in the here and now. And then a whispered greeting from Damien Wells, voice low. "I didn't expect to see you here," just audible enough to carve a ripple in Nate's posture. He shifted, a subtle tightening of shoulders, eyes darting between Claire and Damien, the mental chessboard set with every micro-movement. A champagne cork popped somewhere near the balcony, the sound punctuating Claire's stride as she moved closer, hand brushing against the banister, a flicker of reflection catching in the glass panels. She recalled an argument long ago over a painting they both loved, Nate dismissing her choices, her hands adjusting the cuff of her sleeve, subtle but commanding, eyes locked on Nate as she crossed the room, her heels echoing in measured taps, Damien stepping to shadow her path, silent but present, every whisper, glance, and gesture a strategic push and pull, a tray of desserts tipping slightly as a passing guest brushed it, signaling a micro-shift in the room's balance. She slowed, allowing Nate to notice the calm composure she radiated, lips pressing together in a near imperceptible smirk, the chandeliers casting fragmented patterns on the polished floors, her reflection multiplying, suggesting countless iterations of her resilience. Nate's voice faltered, a faint cough masking a sudden swallow, Claire's hand lightly tracing the edge of the railing, tilting her head to acknowledge Damien's presence, subtle yet commanding. The room seemed to hold its breath, every motion charged, and as the seconds stretched, the question hung palpably. Would the first word be hers or Nate's? And what revelation awaited? In the next move, each movement measured, the audience unaware that a silent game of power had begun. A story of past betrayals, subtle triumphs, and the first flickers of redemption playing out in a sequence of glances, gestures, and the controlled rhythm of a woman reclaiming her space in a world that once cast her aside. "I did not expect you here," Damien Wells said, his voice low but carrying through the edges of the crowded hall, the clink of silverware and hum of conversation wrapping around the words as if to emphasize them. Claire's eyes flicked to Nate Carter, noticing the slight tension in his jaw, the tightening of his shoulders, and the way his champagne glass wavered in the chandelier light. She shifted her weight on her heels, adjusting the strap of her clutch, noticing a small envelope tucked under the dessert tray, a subtle hint that someone had left her a message. Claire bent slightly to pick it up, fingers brushing the polished marble, revealing a folded note with Nate's handwriting, a reminder of a conversation she barely remembered. "Remember our agreement," it said, smudged slightly from a fingerprint. She tucked it into her pocket without a word, eyes never leaving Nate, who had begun to speak again. "Claire, you should see." But Damien subtly stepped into her peripheral, the corner of his mouth twitching, signaling caution. A waiter wheeled past, tipping a glass, spilling rose across the white linen, and Claire moved just in time to avoid it, heels clicking, her hand grazing the edge of the tray, microcosms of chaos underscoring the precision of her movements. The note in her pocket gave weight to her assumption that Nate was orchestrating this encounter. To intimidate her, a flashback of Nate laughing over a mismanaged deal, dismissing her advice resurfaced, solidifying in her mind that he still underestimated her. Claire leaned slightly, engaging in subtle dialogue. "You really think I would forget?" she said softly, the subtext loaded. Nate froze, mouth opening and closing, searching for footing. A sudden interruption. The hall's power dimmed for a second, lights flickering over the crystal chandeliers, shadows stretching across faces, creating a moment of confusion that Claire used to step closer. Damien adjusting the cuff of his jacket, signaling readiness. A waiter's tray wobbled again, a silver spoon clattering to the floor, drawing Nate's eyes downward. She tilted her head, catching the reflected light in the glass panels, imagining him noticing the envelope now hidden, a private victory, the ripple of uncertainty beginning to show on Nate's face. Claire's mind raced through her options, adjusting stance, calculating the next move. The guests oblivious to the shifting power, she tapped a fingertip lightly on the marble balustrade, the echo subtly drawing attention to her presence while maintaining composure. A text buzzed in her purse. She glanced briefly, Damien's name lighting the screen, a reminder of the alignment she had quietly arranged. She pocketed the phone, letting the small axe signal control. Nate's voice attempted normalcy. "Are you here with someone?" Claire's smirk was faint, measured. "Just enjoying the event," she replied, subtext implying the game had already begun. A sudden movement behind a curtain caught her eye, the faint rustle suggesting another presence, a hint that Nate might have allies she had not accounted for. Raising a new question in her mind, she shifted slightly, heels scraping lightly, the scent of polished wood and rose mingling, Damien moving unobtrusively beside her, a mirrored panel catching Nate's gaze in a way that suggested reflection, Claire's hand brushing against the engraved edge of the railing, signaling deliberate pace. The hum of conversation now a background soundtrack to an intricate dance of positioning and observation. Her mind settled on the assumption that Nate intended to unsettle her, reinforced by the smudged note and the small orchestrated disruptions. She decided to move toward the balcony, a calculated choice to draw attention while maintaining control. Nate's fiancée noticed, stepping into block, heels clicking. Claire pivoted smoothly, the subtle shift in stance forcing a micro-power swap, guests whispering, the echo of the drop spoon resonating, the hall's chandelier refracting light across her gown as if painting her trajectory. A final glance toward Nate, subtle, questioning, a new challenge hanging in the space between them. Claire's pocketing of the envelope, the glance at Damien, the shift in position, all building a silent crescendo. The hall held its collective breath, waiting for the next deliberate motion, and Claire's calculated forward step ended the part with a tension thick enough to suggest imminent revelation. The questions of allegiance, hidden messages, and Nate's next move dangling in the air, propelling her toward immediate action. "Watch your step," Claire Donovan said under her breath as her heel caught the edge of a marble step, tilting her balance slightly, the envelope in her pocket pressing against her palm, reminding her of the message from earlier. Nate Carter's eyes followed her with a mix of irritation and calculation, his smile tight, lips pressing together as if restraining words that might unravel his composure. A sudden buzz from her phone vibrated against her thigh, and she flicked a glance to the screen, Damien Wells lighting up the display, the timing unexpected, hinting at a coordination she had not anticipated. The soft hum of the chandelier's lights overhead created shadows that danced across the polished floor, and in that moment Claire misread Nate's gaze, interpreting the brief flicker toward the balcony as an attempt to call an ally, a surge of suspicion solidifying her belief that he was setting a trap. She tightened her grip on her clutch, adjusted the strap, and moved toward the balcony, every step deliberate, heels echoing against marble, the whisper of silk brushing against her arms as a waiter brushed past, knocking a glass that teetered on the edge of the table. Her hand darted to steady it, the liquid splashing slightly but contained, Damien adjusting his stance beside her, the mirrored wall catching reflections that made it seem like multiple Nates were watching her. A subtle flashback of their last confrontation, glass breaking during a tense negotiation, replayed in her mind, reinforcing her conviction that Nate was plotting something. She stepped onto the balcony, the cool air hitting her face, bringing the faint scent of rain. From outside, the envelope pressing heavier in her pocket as if urging her to act, a whispered remark from Nate's fiancée reached her ears. "She does not belong here." The words slicing through the hum of conversation, Claire's hand brushing the railing, considering the implication, the misalignment of glances and gestures confirming her belief that the gala was designed to unsettle her. She shifted her weight, glancing at Damien, who simply nodded subtly, a signal to maintain vigilance. Nate's hand brushed a glass of water, almost tipping it. The movement caught her eye, reinforcing the misperception that he was escalating a challenge. Claire inhaled sharply, adjusted her posture and stepped closer, heels scraping the balcony floor lightly, her eyes scanning the room for unexpected movements. A sudden clatter of a serving tray behind her made her flinch, the sound amplified in the semi-silence. A guest bumping into the tray sent napkins fluttering like white wings across the floor. Nate's attention momentarily diverted. Claire's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the thrill of seizing an opening. She whispered, "Do you think I am unaware?" Her voice low, subtext cutting. Nate froze, caught between defending his space and maintaining civility. The chandelier light fractured over his face, casting small prisms across his features. Claire's eyes caught the reflection of the envelope in Damien's hand, a misperception growing in her mind that perhaps Nate had seen it too, and her belief that she needed to confront the perceived threat escalated. The wind shifted, bringing the sound of a door closing from the main hall, a faint echo that seemed to signal reinforcements. Claire's hand brushed against the engraved edge of the railing, fingertips lingering, calculating. Nate's fiancée stepped closer, inadvertently closing the space, forcing Claire to pivot, heels scraping lightly against stone, micro-adjustment shifting control. Damien mirrored the movement, tension coiling in the small triangle of space. A low murmur from a nearby table caught Nate's attention, breaking his composure momentarily. Claire leaned subtly toward the envelope in her pocket, the weight a reminder of her assumption that she held leverage, and in that precise instant, a champagne cork popped from a distant table, startling both Nate and his fiancée. A sudden shockwave in the social rhythm that left Claire with milliseconds to decide whether to advance further or retreat. Her decision to step forward into the light, letting the shadows fall across Nate's face, cemented a micro-power shift, the misperceived alignment of glances and subtle gestures keeping the tension taut. Questions hanging like unfinished notes. Every element from the envelope to Damien's presence, to the accidental disruptions, pressing her toward a choice, and as she advanced, the balcony edge under her heel seemed suddenly narrower, the cool wind tugging at her gown, the situation poised on the brink of losing control, the uncertainty compelling her next move, all converging into a single silent crescendo that demanded action. "Claire, look over here," Damien Wells whispered sharply, his finger pointing toward a corner of the balcony where a security camera had rotated unexpectedly, catching her presence on a live feed. Claire's eyes narrowed, heels scraping lightly against the marble floor as she adjusted her clutch, the envelope pressing heavily against her palm. She had assumed total control of the situation moments ago, but the camera revealed a new variable. The reflective surface of a glass panel caught Nate Carter's gaze and he froze mid-step, noticing the subtle shift. Claire tilted her head, observing his reaction, a faint glint of panic in his eyes as he realized he was no longer orchestrating the flow entirely. The soft hum of the chandelier vibrating through the ceiling above punctuated the tension. A nearby waiter stumbled, silver utensils clinking against a tray, sending a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Claire seized the pause, stepping closer to the railing, fingertips grazing the engraved edge. Damien stepping in parallel, silently signaling coordination. She caught a glimpse of a small note fluttering from a guest's pocket, the ink smudged, suggesting hurried writing. She tucked it into her clutch, a second unexpected detail hinting at Nate's possible maneuvering behind the scenes. She whispered, "You did not plan for this." Eyes scanning his expression, subtext sharp as glass. Nate's hand brushed against a glass of water, wobbling slightly, the slight movement confirming her assumption that he was attempting to regain control. Claire shifted her weight, recalibrating her step, the misalignment of their positions creating a micro-power shift. A burst of laughter from a distant table drew Nate's attention. He looked to the guests, hesitation flickering, and in that moment, Claire's pulse quickened, imagining the implications. A wind gust hit the balcony, ruffling her hair and sending the note in her clutch slightly crumpled. Damien's gaze moved to the crowd, spotting an unfamiliar figure lingering near the doorway. Claire assumed it was another ally of Nate's. Her belief that she needed to confront the perceived threat solidified. She stepped forward, brushing against the railing, the metal cool under her fingertips. Nate's fiancée moved instinctively to intercept, heels tapping against marble, forcing Claire to pivot. micro-adjustment shifting balance of power subtly in her favor. A low murmur ran across the room, glass clinking, the sound stretching and echoing. Nate's hand hovered over his pocket, adjusting his cuff. Claire misinterpreted the movement as a hidden device, the assumption driving her next step. She leaned toward the edge, the chandelier's light reflecting across the marble, glittering, a visual crescendo underscoring her decision. A sudden vibration from her phone brought a soft buzz against her thigh. She glimpsed Damien's name on the screen, signaling a subtle cue she had not expected at this timing. Claire's mind raced through options, eyes catching Nate's subtle frown, a clear indication of concern. She pivoted toward him, voice low. "Do you think you control this room?" Her words sliced the tension. Nate's mouth opened to respond, but the hum of conversation swallowed it. The sound of a champagne cork popping from the distant table drew all eyes, a fleeting distraction, the balance shifting. Claire adjusted the strap of her clutch, stepping deliberately, heels tapping the wind, catching her gown slightly, the sudden movement brushing past the reflective glass, and in that precise moment, she realized her prior assumption of complete control might be flawed, a minor but critical detail, the flash of doubt pressing against the certainty she had relied on. Nate's eyes locked on hers, a barely perceptible tremor in his jaw. Claire's smirk faltered slightly, Damien's subtle shift beside her reaffirming his readiness, a tray of hors d'oeuvres tipped by a passing guest. Silverware scattering, forcing Claire to adjust stance, heels scraping against marble, all elements converging into a sudden spike of tension. The crowd's whispers and reflections amplifying the uncertainty. The envelope in her clutch a constant reminder of stakes she could not fully see, and as she inhaled sharply, the air carrying the scent of polished wood and wine, she stepped forward, gaze piercing Nate, the scenario on the brink of chaos. Every variable now poised to explode, questions of allegiance, hidden intentions, and the next move hanging palpably, propelling her into immediate action. "Wait," Claire Donovan whispered sharply, her fingers brushing the edge of the balcony railing as she leaned forward, eyes narrowing on Nate Carter, who had stepped back slightly, the reflection of light from the chandelier bouncing across his polished cufflinks, signaling a subtle hesitation. She reached into her clutch, pulling the envelope from earlier, unfolding it carefully, revealing a hastily written note that read, "Meet me by the south exit." Smudged from the press of fingers, Claire's gaze flicked to Damien Wells, who shifted subtly, signaling awareness of a potential trap. The soft hum of conversation around them filled with clinking glasses and low murmurs, punctuated by the scrape of heels against marble. Claire stepped closer to the balcony edge, scanning the crowd, eyes catching a slight movement behind a pillar, a guest adjusting a camera lens. She misinterpreted it as Nate signaling an accomplice, the misperception fueling her next move. She took a deliberate step toward the perceived threat, clutch pressing against her side, and a waiter brushing past bumped a glass that teetered on the tray, wine sloshing slightly, Damien subtly intercepting it, eyes locked on hers, a silent cue that her movement was being watched. Claire whispered, "Did you think I would not notice?" Nate's lips parted, but no sound emerged, his jaw tightening. Her heels clicked as she pivoted toward the south exit, the corridor beyond catching a patch of chandelier light, highlighting the glint of a small metal key dropped unnoticed on the floor. Claire's fingers brushed it instinctively, a detail that revealed another layer of unexpected presence. She crouched slightly, picking it up while maintaining eye contact with Nate, the act forcing a micro shift in control. Nate's hand twitched toward a pocket. Claire interpreted it as reaching for a phone to call backup, the assumption solidifying her immediate decision. Stepping toward him with measured intensity, Damien moving in parallel, the hum of conversation shifting as whispers followed her movements. A soft cough from a distant guest drew Nate's attention, and Claire's eyes caught a subtle furrow of his brow, a hint of concern. Her mind racing, she pushed forward, adjusting her clutch strap, the wind from an open balcony door lifting a corner of her gown, creating a visual distraction that caught Nate's glance. Claire's decision to advance toward him created a new dynamic, the room's attention subtly realigning. A small text buzzed in her purse. She glimpsed it. A notification from an unknown number, image of the south exit corridor, timestamp current, suggesting someone else's watchful eyes, a discovery that partially contradicted her belief that Nate controlled every element. Claire's eyes widened slightly, weighing options, her hand gripping the envelope and key tightly. She took a step back, pivoting subtly, the heels scraping against marble, the light catching the edge of her clutch in a reflective glint. A sudden drop of a napkin from a waiter interrupted the moment, fluttering between her and Nate. A small sound but enough to create hesitation. Claire's heartbeat quickened. She leaned slightly to secure the envelope. Damien's subtle shift indicating he had noticed the movement. Nate's voice broke through softly. "Claire, be careful." The words laced with tension, subtext implying threat and warning. She pivoted once more, eyes catching a faint reflection of movement from the glass panels. A figure she had not noticed before, crouched slightly, hand adjusting a phone, suggesting observation. The discovery shaking her prior assumption of total control, but not fully disproving it. Claire stepped forward, balancing carefully on the edge of decision, clutch and key in hand, the corridor beyond her now uncertain. A low hum of murmured conversation swirling, tension mounting, the situation teetering on the edge of escalation. Every action and object, the envelope, the key, the glint of reflected light, pressing her toward a consequential choice, the moment freezing, anticipation building, leaving her with the pressing question of who was truly orchestrating the unfolding scenario, forcing her next move into immediate and critical action. "Claire, move quickly," Damien Wells murmured as the floor beneath her heels creaked slightly, the envelope and key pressing together in her clutch. She pivoted toward the south corridor, eyes scanning for the unfamiliar figure she had glimpsed earlier. A soft click echoed as a nearby door swung half open. Catching her attention, she leaned slightly, heels scraping the marble, noticing a small paper flutter to the floor, an address scrawled hastily, and her assumption that someone was trailing her seemed confirmed. She stepped forward, clutch held tightly, and a waiter brushed past, nearly tipping a tray of wine glasses, the faint chime of crystal hitting silver reverberating through the hallway. Claire's mind racing, she whispered, "Did you send them?" Damien's glance shifted subtly, hinting at unknown variables. Her previous belief that she controlled the sequence faltered for a moment. She advanced, the corridor narrowing, shadows stretching along the walls. A sudden gust of air from an open balcony door tugged at her gown, causing a paper note to slip from the envelope, landing near Nate Carter's feet. He bent slightly, eyes narrowing as he picked it up. Claire misinterpreted the gesture as a signal to his ally. A surge of tension rising. She made a split-second decision to move toward him, heels tapping sharply. The sound amplified in the corridor, Damien mirroring her pace, the metallic edge of the railing pressing against her fingertips as she adjusted her stance. Nate's fiancé stepped forward, blocking her path, forcing a pivot that shifted control. Claire's voice low, cutting through the murmurs. "Do you think you have the upper hand?" Nate froze momentarily, the faint sheen of sweat on his forehead catching the overhead light, the envelope and key in her hand feeling heavier with responsibility. She took a sharp step forward, the sudden movement causing a loose floor tile to shift beneath her heel. Small clatter echoing, eyes flicking around, her heart thudding as a misstep made her exposed. Damien's subtle movement indicated readiness to intercept any disruption. A flash of movement from the reflection in the glass wall revealed another figure, forcing Claire to reassess, her previous certainty now challenged. She whispered under her breath, "I cannot misjudge this." Pivoting again, her heels scraping stone as she tried to maintain momentum. Nate's eyes widened slightly, a faint signal of concern. Claire reached the railing, fingers brushing engraved edge, glancing at the corridor ahead. A text buzzed in her purse. She glimpsed a new message, time-stamped recently, an image of the balcony with a shadowy figure, forcing the realization that the space was being monitored. Her assumption that she could move unseen began to falter. She stepped forward, envelope pressing against her side, Damien slightly ahead, the narrow space amplifying tension. A small bell rang from the main hall, causing Nate to shift. Claire misread the motion as a calculated threat. She advanced, heels clicking, a reflection of light glancing off her clutch, the micro-power shift tilting briefly toward her. A soft thump behind her signaled the arrival of a waiter with a tray, rattling glasses, distraction giving Nate a moment to recover. Claire's stride faltered slightly, realizing the corridor was more compromised than she believed. A slip of paper caught under her heel sent a tiny crinkle, echoing. Damien's eyes flicking toward it. Claire made a rapid decision to step back, shifting stance, the envelope and key pressed tightly against her. The micro-power inverted, Nate's jaw tightened, eyes tracking her every movement. A sudden creak above suggested movement on the balcony, drawing attention and causing Claire to stumble in momentum. The hall's chatter fading slightly as guests noticed her hesitation, the corridors narrowing, the scattered notes, and the reflective surfaces combined to amplify uncertainty. Claire inhaled sharply, repositioned, the situation teetering on the brink, each movement now fraught with risk, the envelope slipping slightly in her hand, the key brushing the marble, signaling the start of an irreversible sequence, leaving Claire with the pressing, unanswerable question of who held true control and what would unfold next. "Claire, step aside," Damien Wells whispered sharply as a sudden movement across the balcony caught her attention. A curtain fluttering near the corner revealing a faint silhouette. Claire pivoted instantly, heels scraping the stone floor, eyes locking on Nate Carter, whose hand hovered over the note she had dropped moments ago. The chandelier's light fractured across his face, highlighting a fleeting tension in his jaw. She bent slightly to pick up the envelope again, the paper crinkling under her fingers, and noticed a second note tucked inside, partially obscured, the small scrawl hinting at an unknown observer. Claire's assumption that she had anticipated every variable faltered. She adjusted her clutch, stepping closer to the corridor entrance, Damien following, shadows stretching along the marble walls. A waiter brushing past rattled a tray of glasses, crystal chiming against silver, drawing Nate's attention and shifting his posture. Claire's gaze flicked to the balcony railing, fingers brushing the engraved edge, the cool metal grounding her as she made a split-second decision to move toward Nate. A gust of wind from an open door fluttered her gown, revealing the glint of the key in her hand. Nate's eyes widened slightly, the subtext of his expression shifting the perceived control. Claire whispered, "You did not see this coming," subtext slicing through the hum of conversation, and Nate's fiancée stepped forward, heels tapping, inadvertently narrowing Claire's path, forcing her to pivot, the micro-power shift now leaning in her favor. A sudden vibration from her phone drew her gaze, a message from an unknown contact displaying a photo of the South Corridor, time-stamped within the last minute. Claire's belief that she could predict every move wavered. She took a deliberate step forward, the heel of her shoe scraping the marble, causing a soft echo, the hallway's reflective panels catching light from the chandelier, projecting multiple fractured images of Nate and the shadowy figure. The scene bending her perception, she leaned toward Damien slightly, whispering, "This changes everything." The gesture amplifying tension, Nate's hand shifted toward his cuff. Claire misread the motion as signaling a hidden device, the assumption propelling her forward, and as she advanced, a loose floor tile shifted beneath her weight, a soft clatter reverberating, the minor mishap amplifying the risk. A glass tipped on a distant table, wine sloshing slightly, Damien intercepting, maintaining composure. Claire's pulse quickened, eyes catching Nate's faint frown, a subtle acknowledgement that he had lost a fragment of control. A soft cough from a guest drew attention, the crowd murmuring, distraction creating a fragile opening. Claire's fingers brushed the edge of the balcony, adjusting the strap of her clutch, eyes scanning for movement, the note in her hand pressing importance. A reflective panel caught a flicker of motion, revealing another observer previously unnoticed, her prior assumption of unilateral control crumbling. She whispered under her breath, "I need to move now." Pivoting toward the corridor, the heels clicking sharply, the envelope and key held tightly, Nate's voice rising slightly, "Claire, wait." The tone straining between warning and command. She ignored the plea, stepping forward, a soft thump behind her signaling a waiter with a tray, crystal rattling, echoing, momentum broken, and as she inhaled sharply, the narrow corridor ahead revealing a subtle glint of light from an unknown device placed near the exit. Claire's mind raced, a sudden awareness that every step carried compounded risk, leaving her in a delicate, electrified balance, pressing her into immediate action with stakes higher than ever. "Claire, now," Damien Wells said softly, stepping slightly behind her as a soft breeze from the open balcony door ruffled the hem of her gown, the chandelier light scattering in sharp prisms across the marble. She pivoted on her heels, clutch and key pressing against her side, eyes locking on Nate Carter, whose smile had tightened into a line, glass in hand catching the light in a sudden glint. She noticed a folded card on the balcony floor, its corner peeking from under a flower pot. She reached down swiftly, flipping it open, revealing the logo of the company Nate worked for. A subtle hint that her assumptions about his control were partially correct yet incomplete. She rose, letting the card slide into her clutch, Damien's hand brushing lightly against her elbow, steadying without overt interference. A waiter passed, tilting a tray, champagne splashing softly onto the marble, the sound echoing, drawing Nate's glance momentarily downward. Claire used the opening to step closer, heels clicking sharply, the movement forcing Nate to shift stance, the power subtly tilting toward her. A faint buzz in her purse drew her eyes, A message from Damien showing a photo of the south exit with the door slightly ajar, time-stamped moments ago, confirming a potential path forward yet hinting at unknown observers. Claire whispered under her breath, "It ends here." Stepping decisively, the wind lifting strands of hair across her face, glinting off the metal edge of her clutch. Nate's eyes flicked to Damien and back to her, a flicker of recognition in his gaze, his smile softening yet eyes wary. Claire inhaled, adjusting her posture, the envelope and card pressing heavily, pivoting toward Nate, her voice low. "You underestimated me." The words cutting through the soft hum of conversation. Nate's fiancée stepped forward, heels tapping against marble, attempting to block the corridor. Claire pivoted elegantly, subtle but commanding. Damien, stepping in a measured shadow alongside. A soft rustle from the crowd as guests noticed the micro-shift. A loose curtain by the balcony stirred from the breeze, revealing a faint shimmer of a reflective device. Claire's eyes caught it, realizing surveillance extended further than assumed, the misperception of control forcing her to make a rapid choice. She stepped forward, clutch pressed against her side, hand brushing the engraved railing, power shifting in her favor. Nate inhaled sharply, lifting his glass to subtly signal restraint, the metallic click of the chandelier above punctuating the tension. A tray of appetizers wobbled behind a passing guest, silverware clinking, forcing Claire to adjust stance mid-step, every micro-adjustment reinforcing authority while maintaining poise. A faint squeak from the balcony floorboard suggested weight elsewhere. Her eyes flicked to a corner, shadow stretching unnaturally. Claire moved slightly toward it, heels tapping, a soft rustle indicating Damien's presence behind her, eyes locking briefly. He gave a minimal nod, the combined presence projecting calm and competence. Nate's hand twitched, a subtle signal of tension. Claire inhaled, adjusting the strap of her clutch, stepping decisively into the light, glinting prism across her gown. Subtext sharp, power layered, voice low. "Watch carefully," she said, and the hall seemed to pause, the chandelier refracting across marble and glass. Nate's eyes widening, subtle fear under controlled composure. A faint movement from behind a pillar suggested another observer, a reflective glint from a glass panel catching her attention. The unexpected reveal creating a new question of alignment and authority, forcing Claire to make her next move under the heightening stakes. Poised between confrontation and revelation, every step pressing the scenario toward an imminent climax. "Step aside," Claire Donovan said firmly, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she advanced into the center of the balcony, the chandelier scattering fractured light across her black gown. Nate Carter froze mid-step, glass in hand trembling slightly, the envelope and key pressing against her side. A folded note fluttering from Damien Wells' hand, time-stamped seconds ago. Confirmed surveillance from an unexpected angle. Claire bent slightly to pick it up, fingers brushing the cool metal of the railing. Damien stepping close, subtly signaling readiness without interfering. She adjusted her posture, turning slowly toward Nate, voice low. "This is where it ends." The words slicing the soft murmur of the gala. Nate's fiancée stepped forward, heels tapping against marble, trying to block the narrow corridor. Claire pivoted elegantly, skirt sweeping lightly, power shifting subtly as Damien's presence shadowed hers. A soft clatter from a dropped champagne glass echoed, drawing attention. Nate flinched, eyes darting briefly toward the spill. Claire stepped forward, heels scraping, a reflective panel catching light from the chandelier, revealing Damien's faint silhouette, and the overlapping reflections of herself and Nate fractured the space visually, reinforcing her control. A soft buzz from her phone drew her gaze. A text from Damien showing the open balcony door, glinting in moonlight, a hint of an unseen passage. Claire inhaled sharply, adjusted the clutch in her hand, pivoted toward Nate again, whispering, "Do not underestimate me." His jaw tightened, hands lowering, glass glinting, a micro-power shift visible in the tension between them. She advanced slowly, steps deliberate. A breeze lifted her hair slightly, glinting against her earrings, reflection catching Nate's eye. The moment suspended. A faint rustle behind a curtain suggested another watcher. Claire ignored it, focusing her gaze, Damien's hand lightly brushing hers as she shifted stance. A low murmur from guests rippled through the hall, crystal chimes echoing faintly. Claire's eyes catching a slip of paper from under Nate's foot, folding slightly under his heel, glinting in the chandelier light. She bent just enough to pick it up, the printed text hinting at the corporate event Nate had organized secretly. A flash of realization crossing her mind. The micro-power balance shifting again. She straightened, clutch pressing against her side. Heels clicking with renewed confidence. Nate's lips parted, words failing him. Claire's gaze lifting toward Damien briefly, the subtle nod affirming the unspoken alliance and composed presence. She advanced a final step, voice steady, watch carefully. The hum of the hall fading, reflections bouncing across marble and glass, light